What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at SoundHound AI stock, ticker symbol SOUN, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Tuesday, March 19th. Alright guys, so SoundHound AI stock here, at least intraday, was down 67 cents per share. That's minus 7.52% intraday. We did fade a little bit after hours. However, we now have an upside move that has essentially reclaimed basically the entirety of today's 7.5% loss in the after hours. We now know that SoundHound is going to offer on-chip voice AI with NVIDIA. Now listen, I'm not going to flip what I always say, because you guys know what I'm always saying here. Even if the after hours move is very exciting for bulls, even if it's on news, I always say that if volume does not meet or exceed intraday, then we especially have to take the after hours move with a grain of salt. Now, that is the case 99% or more of the time. Here in the after hours on SoundHound, we do have volume that meets or exceeds at least some of the intraday volume that we saw. So, that being the case with volume, that does add some legitimacy to a move, whether it's upside or downside in the after hours. It's still the after hours, okay? And I'm still going to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, because I know that the real test is always the open the following day. However, if I'm a bull, I'd prefer to reclaim that loss in the after hours than be flat or down even more, which was the case prior to the pump. Because, of course, it is currently the real price, right? That's the agreed upon price by the market in the after hours. But I need to see the volume come in at the open. Okay, again, that'll be the real test. So we'll see tomorrow morning. But let's get started here with our volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. And we will include the volume after hours because it is such an obvious move here that we must look at. So we're looking for three things, right? Obvious changes in volume that correlate with obvious changes in stock price, and it has to be outside of the context of what is typically expected that time of day. And now always remember, the goal here, the reason we're doing this to begin with, is to see if we can pull out any bias, any hidden bias that is not obvious or even available by simply looking at the stock chart of the price movement itself, okay? So the moves that I'm primarily interested in here, let's circle them up. I really want to look at this move here, okay? I'm interested in this, well, let's separate those, there and there, all right? And then we got, kind of a recovery, but I can already see it's on lower volume into the after hours. All right, now, of course, we have to consider this move because it's a fundamental change, right? We're getting a drive off of the catalyst in the after hours. So understand that the first three of these four were before the slight fundamental change. Or I suppose I should just say the fundamental change. Okay, so keep that in mind when we're looking at these first three, but let's take a look here. Now, you can see that it's pretty clear we did see a little bit of bearish bias on that second. We got the dump off and then a little bit of a recovery there, right? And then that quick fade with 4 consecutive red candles, and we did see a little bit of bearish bias in there. Okay, so understand that off that first move, we did see that, again, before the fundamental change in the after hours. This little move intraday, for me, I like to see a minimum of 3 consecutive candles with elevated out-of-context volume, so I'm going to have to call that one a wash. This one here, again, we see essentially a match on this first, and then 2 elevated. Some bears might argue that that is bearish bias, but, this off the open is undoubtedly so. This here, again, I have to call kind of a wash because we're not seeing enough consecutive candles to prove to me that this isn't simply a little bit too random for my taste. And the reason I say that as well is if you line up here, you see this candle was actually one of those larger volume candles, and that was the intraday low. Okay, so when you see intraday lows with a wick, that tells me that it was a battle between buyers and sellers, which naturally pumps up the volume a little bit. Okay, now in the after hours, I mean, listen, it would be ridiculous to sit here and say that there isn't, that's a very obvious bullish bias, right? We can't sit here and say that there's not. There is at least 4, well, they're not technically consecutive because this one breaks it up, which is essentially even with the start of that, a little bit of a pullback there. But we have a good amount of out of context, back-to-back green bars on that big upside move, a very clear bullish bias, which then proceeds to fade in volume as the after hours moves on and as the stock price kind of consolidates out through the end of after hours here. So rather clear bullish bias in the after hours, but again, it's after hours, okay? Things trade typically a little more thin in the after hours, so take it with a bit of a grain of salt. The open is the real test. So that being said, let's move on now to the self-fulfilling prophecy psychological levels that I'm paying attention to here tomorrow. Okay, now here on the 30-minute chart, a very popular time frame with incredibly popular moving averages, the 50 period and the 200 period. If you guys caught the weekend video, we were talking a lot about this 50 period. We actually gave that up intraday. Now, we have now reclaimed it after hours. However, with breaks and reclaims of psychological levels like a 50 period moving average on a chart as popular as a 30-minute, I need to see that occur intraday. Okay? Yes, we're back above it in the after hours, but I want to see that hold intraday when the real volume and carried out with a lot of volume over a period of time, over a couple of hours. I want to see that play out. So bulls here tomorrow, really simple. The mission on the 30-minute chart is to hold the 50 period, any retest, high volume pull away, right? Bounce upside on big volume, or simply a higher volume move upside to really show. Though, to be honest with you, I prefer retests, even though it is a little bit of backslide. I much prefer that over just a simple pull away, because a pull away with no retest leaves doubt. I don't like doubt. I want the bears to get their day in the sun and be discouraged if I'm a bull. Okay, I want them to have their shot and lose if I'm a bull. Okay, bears, same with you, right? A break downside back through that 50 period on big volume and basically say, hey, intraday, we're not ready for that yet. Break downside, big volume, but make that retest on ideally low volume and then a hard high volume rejection. That tells us, okay, bulls, we gave you your shot to reclaim that and you lost. That discourages the bulls, right? At least in the very short term, right? We're zoomed in. All right, now onto the 4-hour chart. Let's see if this is contextual. And you can see here that there's a little bit of space in between where we currently find ourselves and that 50 period on the 4-hour chart. Quite a bit of space, 22.7% to the downside, about 23% actually. Between the close is going to be a little bit less. That's approximately 15% or so. So bulls, as much as I think it's important to keep the stock price close to the 50 period on the 4-hour chart, just to, again, push doubt out of the contrarians' heads, a retest is not ideal. You're talking a 23% downside move. Okay. Ideally, since this is a day-to-day video, we'll just talk about baby steps on the 4-hour chart. Ideally, you just want to see that 50 period come to the stock price, not the stock price come to the 50 period if you're a bull. Meaning, ideally, that 50 period reclaiming $7 a share tomorrow. I'd be happy with that if I'm a bull. Bears, really, you guys would like to see the volume come in such a way that that 50 period begins to flatten out. Ideally ahead of 7, especially ahead of 750 or 8 as the days go on. Now, if there's one chart that you do not skip, it's the daily. This is the most important chart, the most contextual, the most psychological, and has the most eyeballs. Now remember, this is the daily, so we're not going to show after hours movement. We're simply showing the closing price. After hours, the stock is at 888. So, the battle tomorrow, the clear story, listen, tomorrow's the battle of $9 a share. Okay, we kind of tested that today and faded, right? If you look here, let's go to the 5-minute, that'll show it best. We tested that here today and faded. We faded off 9 off the open, right? So ideally here on the daily, since the stock price is currently at 888 after hours, tomorrow's the battle of $9 a share. Okay, it is the real price, even though we're taking it with a grain of salt. Now, bulls, what's your real, what are we really looking at if we're bulls here in the near term? I would argue $10 a share. It's the clear psychological level that also happens to be that recent high of 10 and a quarter, around there. Okay, the battle of 9 sets us up to make an honest test of 10. Not necessarily in one day, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, just breaking and holding 9 is a step in the right direction. So bears, if your enemy is 10, because that changes things a little bit. If the stock is able to get up and hold above 10, perhaps it jumps on some people's scanners that haven't been looking at it yet. If your enemy is kind of $10 a share, then your friend is 9 being a ceiling, staying ahead of that $10 a share level. 9 is kind of like that last safety net if you're a bear. Okay, so a rejection off of 9 tomorrow as hard as possible, like a repeat of this morning's open, Monday's open here. That's your ideal scenario. Okay, tomorrow's the battle of 9. And again, as always, spending as much time of the intraday session on your side, depending on your bias, of $9 a share as possible to allow a big sample size to come in and say, listen, we agree. Okay, I'm not talking like bulls. I'm not talking you spend the whole day at 850 and then all of a sudden with 3 minutes left, you pump to 901. That's a weak hold, or break more so. Even though that would be a big move, it doesn't prove much in the way of $9 a share. All right, now, my favorite part of the video here, let's take a look at the options bias. Okay, how are traders positioning themselves here today, heading into tomorrow, Tuesday? Understand, this isn't going to consider after hours here. So this is really interesting. This is simply considering the 7.5% down day. 161,000 total contracts traded, 115,000 of those were calls, and 46,000 of those were puts. Okay, a heavy call side bias. I'm very interested to see where this ends up tomorrow. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to the channel, and we'll be analyzing this tomorrow as well once the options chain has a chance to consider today's after hours move. I'm curious to see where this ends up. Now you can see here the short-term speculators, although volume is a little bit low, and we have to take that with a grain of salt, the 0 to 20 delta range. Those are those short-term bets being made. We had just under 10,000 calls and about 16,700 puts here today. So if this after hours move holds, you're going to have, a put side bias in the short term that's not all that happy. But again, as always, that real test is market open tomorrow. Listen, if you find yourself kind of wishing for some guidance, or if your goal is to simply try to expedite the process of going part or full-time as a trader, I highly encourage you to check out our Roensch Capital Gold server. It's at the link in the pinned comment. Every day I'm in there working with the group, not only my Platinum one-on-one members, but also everyone else as well. There's 4 tier options, and I'm sending out every day my personal scalp setup alerts, my in-play stock alerts, human verified unusual options activity that comes through that I verify myself as being truly unusual. That's not alerted by a bot. Those are actually titled by a bot for your convenience in terms of push notifications, but they're sent through by me. And I also send out any swing trade setups that I'm looking at as they come across. Hope to see you join. I think you'll find it very valuable. Appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.